Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called Dungeon Derby and it's from Rabbiteer Games. Now if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page to find out even more information than I could possibly tell you here. You can do that by following the link in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. Now, Dungeon Derby is a competitive racing game with a lot of betting elements to it. You and the other players are like these dark masters who are controlling these champions who are like monsters and magical people in this fantasy realm. And these champions are going to be running through a dungeon trying to avoid traps, avoid each other, and get to the finish line as quickly as possible. But of course, it's not going to be even that simple, and that's not simple at all, because also you can cast spell cards out into the field. You can equip the champions with armor ahead of time, and secretly you and the other masters are going to be betting on who you think is going to win. Now, if your champion wins, you get some money, but even if it doesn't win, you could potentially win a lot of money anyways just by betting on the champions you think will win, even if it's not your own. Now, before we go any further, let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is played with a prototype version of the game. So do bear in mind what you see here may change in the final version, and that's why you should go to the Kickstarter page to find out more information. And in any event, we will come back and discuss it further. Dungeon Derby is a competitive game for 2 to 6 players. Each player is a master in control of a champion that is competing against the other players in a series of races through a dungeon. You'll place bets on who you think will win each race while trying to win with your own champion yourself, all while using special powers and traps to influence things in your favor. After the final round and final race, whichever player has the most value in their treasure pile will win the game. Set up the game by first laying out the dungeon board. At the top of the board are places to put the shuffled treasure card and quest card decks and their discard piles. You'll also make a stock of what's called the Dungeon Master's money in different denominations, which are the chips you'll be betting with and also trying to hoard during the game. Put one player in charge of these payouts as the bookie for the rest of the game. Also, somewhere near the board, you should keep the IOU sheets handy, which you'll need if you find yourself in arrears to the Dungeon Master, and also keep 2 special dice nearby for later use. We'll explain that in a moment. Shuffle the race purse cards and deal out a number of them face down depending on the number of players. For this 6-player game, we'll do 6 races. Next to this area will be the stocks of encounter tokens like traps and loot. Every player chooses a champion, either by choice or at random, and takes a betting board and a set of betting tokens, which consists of 1 token for each of the different champions. And they get a figure which they place out in the starting lineup. It doesn't matter where you place it at the start of the game, as it's going to change before the first race starts. Each player also gets $250 worth of chips from the bookie, and in turn order, starting with the player after the designated Dungeon Master, they'll place their champion and counter token out on the board. A champion who lands on one of these will owe the owner either $100 or a random treasure. And finally, one player is randomly given the Dungeon Master token, as I mentioned before. The Dungeon Master controls the flow of the race and will settle any disputes. This role will pass to the next player in line after each race. Each round of Dungeon Derby is broken down into phases. The first phase is the Draw Quest phase. Starting with the player to the left of the current Dungeon Master, you may draw up to 3 treasure cards from the deck. If you have less than $250, you may instead draw up to 3 quest cards instead, or mix and match. Now let's talk about those cards. Treasure cards come in 3 varieties. Armor cards can be equipped to champions and can do things like increase that champion's movement or bet value, or could have negative effects like hampering that particular champion's movement. Spell cards are instants that can be used during the race to manipulate the outcome, like slowing down or speeding up a champion, or straight up getting more cash for yourself. And encounters allow tokens to be placed on the board in champions' lanes. These can be trap tokens that harm the champion's movement, extra loot so they can collect treasure cards or cash, or random monsters that need to be instantly challenged via die roll. Quest cards are a last-ditch effort to get some cash when you're broke. They usually require you to perform some kind of task either in or out of game, or make a random die roll, and if it's successful you get a small amount of cash. But beware, because sometimes these can backfire on you badly and you'll get nothing or even lose more. Next is the lineup phase. The new Dungeon Master wipes away any lingering armor cards from the previous round, returns the champions to their starting spaces, and flips over a new purse card and stocks the prize row with the money for first, second, and third place. Purse cards have a few pieces of information. They'll tell you the starting positions for the new race, the prizes for first, second, and third place winners, and the betting odds for players who successfully bet on first place. Some cards also have special conditions for the race, like doubling die rolls for the round, leaving triggered traps on the board, or paying for people who bet on the second and third place winners in addition to first. Next is the armor encounter phase. This is where players will simultaneously start playing armor cards and encounter cards. Armor cards go onto the slots in each champion's lane face down to a limit of 3 first come, first served per champion. Encounter cards are discarded and the corresponding token is placed on the board. Once all this is done, the betting phase is next. Every player will take their betting tokens to hand, secretly decide who they want to bet on, and then place the token or tokens face down on their betting board. Then they take the amount of cash in chips that they're wagering and place it on top of each token. You can place as many wagers as you like on as many champions as you like. But bear in mind, the armor cards are still face down at this point. You do not have perfect information. Next is the actual race phase. All the armor cards are revealed in the order that they were laid down, and the Dungeon Master for the round will read them out loud to make sure there's no conflicts. Then the Dungeon Master will start rolling the 2 dice. One die will tell you which champion is moving, and the other tells you how many spaces from 1 to 6. After each roll, the Dungeon Master needs to give each player a chance to use spell cards to affect the race. But barring that, the designated champion will move and also potentially trigger any encounter tokens along the way for better or for worse, which will then remove them from the map. The race ends as soon as champions cross the finish line and first, second, or third place are determined. The final phase is payout. First, second, and third place masters collect their winnings, and the bookie pays out winning bets to players, if any. Conversely, the money from losing bets must now be paid to the bookie, and if you can't pay, an IOU must be written up. The game ends after the last race is completed and everyone gets or gives their last payout. Whoever has the most total treasure value at this point is the winner of the game. That is Dungeon Derby. Dungeon Derby is really interesting because there's a lot of racing board games. I don't even know if there's a lot, actually, but there are other racing board games, but so many of them just boil down to very simplistic roll dice, move, roll dice, move, roll dice, move. Maybe characters have a special power or something, or there's some sort of wrinkle to everything. You can gear up ahead of time, whatever, but it's still very... The actual race itself is the dominating aspect of the game, and it's usually really simplistic. It almost feels like the race in Dungeon Derby is just a smaller part of everything else that's going on, because really it's all about wagering smartly, but also using your cards smartly. This is, in a sense, a hand management game and card management game. You have to make sure that you are quickly putting armor cards down onto the champions that you need to slow down people, to speed up the champions you want to win, including your own, that type of thing. And that's the interesting aspect, too, since I touched on it, is that, yeah, you have a champion that is your champion, and it'd be great if your champion would win because you get prize winnings, either first, second, or third place. But, why not hedge your bets, literally, and, wager on others and make sure, like, okay, well, someone just put a bunch of different encounter tokens and trap tokens in my champion's way. That's okay. I can wager on someone else, and I've got some spell cards here, and that's where the hand management comes in, that I can use during the race as well that they don't know about. So there's a lot of different things going on. You've got those armor cards you can stack up in front ahead of time. There's so many different types of encounter tokens, and not all of them are bad. You could, if you're lucky, be able to put some of those encounter tokens in front of your champion and get some treasure or extra cash loot during the game, or do something to make sure that bad tokens go to your opponents and away from you as quickly as possible. Sometimes just getting those trap tokens in your hand is a relief because they're not going to be used on you. It's just a very interesting thing. The theme is also interesting too because there's all these all the different champions are very distinct from one another. There's going to be much higher quality components in the final version of the game, not just in this preview copy that I have, so you can look forward to that. And I didn't even touch on the quest, the whole aspect of, okay, I'm dead broke, so now I'm going to have to do something potentially humiliating, or at least interesting and funny, to try and get just a little bit more cash to keep myself in the game, which is another very interesting thematic element as well. So it's really something, because the game keeps itself as simple as it needs to be at times, but at other times it can be very strategic, and you have to really worry and wonder about what you're going to do and how you're going to place your bets for the next turn. And because you have a series of races, it's not too devastating if you lose badly in one race, because you can come back from it. And because there are so many races, and because there are special conditions for each race, it keeps things fresh and lively every single time. So if that appeals to you, if you like the fantasy theme, if you like the racing theme, if you want a game that casual people can play but strategic players are not going to get too bored with, then definitely check out Dungeon Derby. You don't have to take my word for it. Go to the official Kickstarter project page and find out more information for yourself. You can do so, as I said before, by following the link in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. That is Dungeon Derby from Rabbiteer Games. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, for supporting our sponsors. Take care.